Our legal corner attorney and legal correspondent David Lesch joins us now, discussing the issue of teacher layoffs and the rights of students. He's also giving us some new info on his program that's airing right here on Bronxnet, a new program called Today's Verdict. And David, good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Well, Bronx Legal had a nice 2-year run, but it was picked up by a couple of stations throughout New York City. And I think the producers and I felt it was necessary to at least change the name so it was a little more user-friendly for the rest of the boroughs. So we chose Today's Verdict, and last night was the premiere episode. We went live, and the first episode dealt with teacher layoffs and how it affects students. We had a professor on, Professor Natalie Gomez-Velez from CUNY Law School, who was a terrific guest. And basically, what she was talking about, she gave a little bit of a history of the school system itself and how the mayor took over in 2002 and the changes that have been made since then. And what most people do not realize is that when the mayor took control in 2002, and we had a couple of teacher advocates who came on in the second half of the show to really push this point forward, that the public lost a lot of power in deciding the type of education their children should be getting.
Right.
Now, I grew up in the public school systems of Queens, the elementary school, junior high school, and high school, and there was a profound difference in each school that I ended up going to. My elementary school was really terrific, my junior high school not so great, and my high school was okay. And why should that be? And a lot of it had to do with class size. My elementary school had a very small student-to-teacher ratio, whereas junior high school, I had at least 35 to 40 kids in my class. That wasn't the same thing for elementary school. That seems to be the problem now in most of the schools throughout the Bronx and throughout New York City. The student-to-teacher ratio is growing. The cuts that are coming, and that's we discussed last night in the show, is going to directly affect that because they're going to lay off almost 6,500 teachers coming in September. And if that happens, what do they have to do? You have less teachers, you got to increase class size. So the crux of the show last night was basically what could you do as a parent to prevent this from happening? And there are certain organizations now that are bringing lawsuits or pushing through the courts ways to stop the mayor from instituting these layoffs. And I guess we'll see sometime in September whether this actually goes through.
What else can we expect from Today's Verdict? Because obviously it's a big season coming up.
Big season coming up. I think we're going to shoot every 2 weeks. We have the NFL lockout coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to see what that's going to bring, what type of guests we're going to have. I'd love to have a professional player on. I don't know if by contract if we can get that, but we certainly will discuss the lockout from the owner's perspective, from the player's perspective, contractually, whether you can lock somebody out, because it's a legal show. Today's Verdict is still a legal show, just like Bronx Legal, and most of the shows are going to have a legal flair to it, and we're going to try and hit the topics that are really important to the average Bronxite and to the average New Yorker. We're going to hit a lot of immigration issues. That's always a big one. A lot of landlord-tenant issues. People want to know exactly what their rights are with respect to their landlords, and just your general issues, your day-to-day. Those are the types of things that people want to know. With the old show, we hit a couple of topics involving, embryonic stem cell and frozen embryos and whether you can sell them or not sell them in surrogates. So we've hit some topics that are very interesting, but that they may not appeal to every Bronxite that watches. Today's Verdict will hit a little of everything, and I think in terms of the packages that we're going to put together and the reporting that it's going to be out in the field, that I think people are going to be very happy with the show. I know last night I was happy with it, and I enjoyed the guests. I think the graphics are great. I think it's going to take a little while to really get comfortable with it, but certainly it's going to be shown in a lot of the other boroughs. And I appeal to the viewers that if they do have an issue or a topic that they would like to see discussed on Today's Verdict, just email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org, and don't be shy, whatever you think it is, and I'll see if I can deal with it. And it's a call-in show too, call in.
Right.
And I'm very, very excited about it.
Talk about today's verdict. Let's talk about today's topic.
All right, well, today's topic is, dealing with students' rights, and that has a lot to do with, student and parents' rights. Students now, they go to school, they get their cell phones taken away, they end up in detention. What are the rights? Students don't have very many rights in school. What they do have a right to is a very good education, and that's very important. And that had to do a little bit of what we were talking about last night in Today's Verdict in terms of the student-to-teacher ratio. I was talking to one of the guests offset before I came on, and the issue is how do you approach a situation where you feel your child's not getting the type of education you want, and you generally have to do it through the appeal system in the system itself.
Right.
You can't bring it to the court system unless it's more of a class action. Or the campaign for fiscal equity is a campaign to get better funding for the school system. For various programs.
Right.
That was discussed last night in the program. Now that can be brought in the court system because it's really more of a class action. It's not per individual student. If it was an individual student, your child, my child, that would be different. Then you got to go through the administrative process, and then if you want your child transferred for either a special transfer or a safety transfer, again through the system. But if it's a big change in your New York City public school, and you want more money for certain after-school programs or even gym programs or athletic programs, you got to do it within the system. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that, and they don't really take the time to find out how they can make sure that their child is getting the type of education they want.
Same thing applies for students in terms of that. You got to go within the system.
Always within the system. You have to go within the system, an administrative process, and that's how it works. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be times, that you can appeal in a federal level. You go to the federal court system if you feel you're not getting civil rights protections, if they're being discriminated against based on color, based on gender. That would be different. You can bring a Title VII action in federal court, but you generally don't see that. More often than that, it's that no one's watching my child learn. No one's checking, that he's done his homework when he comes back into school. They're running around class. They're not really learning. And yet, the teachers' advocates that came in yesterday, because I said, well, it doesn't look like the graduation rates are any different. If anything, they're better now that the mayor has taken over the school system. And the advocate said, well, look, that may be true, but that doesn't mean that they're learning anymore, any better. It means that the teachers have the pressure of graduating their students, but they're not any better students. And that's important to know. So just because your child is making it to the next grade doesn't necessarily mean that they're learning as much as they could be learning. And some of the charter schools are taking care of this, yet some of the charter schools, they're not doing as well either. So it's all about money. It's all about funding and getting the right funding to get as many teachers as you can to protect the students. And it's the student ratio. And, they convince me. Because, on the show, I try and play devil's advocate many times. And I say, look, the city's running out of money. Where are you going to take it from? The police? You can take it from the firemen? The court system? But where are you going to take the money from? It's got to come from somewhere. We don't seem to be raising taxes. So where is it coming from? But yet, they convinced me that education was so important and the student-teacher ratio is such an important thing to keep that I would love to find money anywhere else to see if we could fund that. And I think it was a very, very important issue because it trickles down. It trickles down to all of us. If there's not money for student after-school programs, where's the student going to go? What are they going to do? Are they going to hang out with their friends? And without any structure.
And we saw throughout the last few weeks, and actually the last few months, we've had people here on set who've argued about the fact of restoring funding to city schools and going to Albany and making their case known, and they did it in a legal sense and a non-legal sense, and still were able to see some things accomplished.
Well, they've had some accomplishments. Certainly in 2009 there was a referendum on the mayor's ability to control the schools. They've had some minor changes now. Parents can get a little bit more involved in the process, but getting involved is one thing, but getting money to fund the programs is another, and I think that's the problem. It's getting the money into the system. The mayor feels that everybody has to cut back, and in terms of the Board of Education, it's cutting back on teachers, laying off 6,000, 7,000 teachers. It's going to be devastating for the school system. I asked the person on set, well, does this mean that there's going to be some closings of schools? And she said, no, that's not going to really necessarily happen. It's not the closings of schools, it's the expanding of the classroom. So we're only going to see what's going to happen in September. Hopefully they can prevent it. The campaign for fiscal equity can prevent it. Take money from other places that they feel the school system has and is not using properly. Unions, different unions that are spending money within the school system, contractors, that type of thing. Take it from there and use it in the classroom. But whenever you're taking money from one group to another, there's always going to be a legal matter going on, and we'll just see where it heads.
All right. Well, Dave, we'll continue to follow this up. David Lesch, as always, and congratulations on today's verdict.
Thank you very much.
All righty.